welcome back. This is Module 10, the last module. We, of course, hope that you've been following right along and things have been going well for you. This module is a little different than some of the others in that we are going to explain some of the items on the outline. Of course, your task will be to find the specific points of information in the outline in your reference books. But the video itself is going to focus primarily on plan reading and how to go about estimating certain types of problems. When you're done with this module, take the module test, see how you do on the math questions, and then go to the cram book as indicated. If you'll take out Module 10 along with me for a moment, I just want to point a few things out before we go into the general subject of plan reading. Start with Roman numeral number 1, project management. All along we've been indicating to you that the test is loaded in the area of what I would call the soft side of the subject. We've talked about employee regulations, we've talked about accounting, we've talked about licensing law, we've talked about business organizations, we've talked about insurance. And now what is happening is the thrust of the exam is trying to put all of this together into the context of how do you actually manage and run a construction project. The first thing you have to recognize is that the sense of the exam is that we're talking about a large construction company, and this may be outside of your own personal experience. The exam is interested in the division of labor that would occur with a large construction company, and so it's going to be focused on who does what. You have a vice president, you have a superintendent, you have an estimator. All of this is indicated in your outline, and the Contractor's Manual, Chapter 10, goes into this in detail. But just so that you get a sense of what's happening, we're talking about a big company, probably beyond your own personal experience, and you have to take the information that you've been given and integrate it into the idea of how you would run a successful project. If you look at item number 1, Roman numeral 1-4, the topic is estimating. We know that there are math questions relating to estimating, but here we're talking about styles and methodologies of estimating and how it all links together with contracts. The gist that they're trying to point out here is that estimating requires a tremendous number of steps, that you start out by, in a sense, coming up with a rough idea, and then you move along to try to get to very specific ideas of what's involved. That depending on the type of contract you're going to sign, you are going to select the type of estimating you're going to use. For example, if you were going to engage in a lump sum contract where you're committing yourself to a price, you're probably going to want to estimate a little bit more specifically than by the square foot percentage method, because you're going to be committed to a price and you have to make sure that you're correct. You'll also notice in the outline, if you go with me to item Roman numeral 1, item 4B, types of estimating. If you look at B3, which is the listing of the types of steps in an estimate, the first section there, section A, is essentially talking about scheduling. The exam at the present time is very focused on this issue of scheduling. There is a very thorough discussion of scheduling in the CRAM exam booster, and you need to go through that. But in addition to how to calculate a critical path, you also are going to need to be able to be familiar with the nomenclature of the critical path. And item A talks about the different approaches to the subject of visually representing how things are to be done. The difference between the bar chart, number 1, and the CPM, number 2, is that the bar chart shows you how long each item takes, but not necessarily how they all group together. The critical path is not one method, but is a name representative of many different methods. The differences between the methods are simply some of the nuances as to how they are drawn and calculated, but the bottom line is that you want to visually show activities, you want to show activities that can be done at the same time, and then activities that must be shown in a linear progression. You want to find out at what points or events these activities converge so that you can answer the question, what has to happen before the next step in the project starts? You want to spend a little bit of time going through both Walker's and this last chapter of Big Blue, Chapter 10, so that you can be familiar with this nomenclature. You can expect many questions about the issue of scheduling. If you have any questions at all about it, please bring it up in your class. If you continue on with me in the outline, you'll get to item number 7, which is equipment estimates. And here's where we are getting back into the general type of question that deals with how do you evaluate whether a piece of equipment is valuable or not. That type of question can be focused on the production value of a piece of equipment, which we have discussed in the principles and practices of heavy construction. Or it can be a question relating to accounting as to how do you value a piece of equipment in the books. How do you determine a salvage value, which all would be in the first chapter of Walker's? And then how do you carry that forward to see what a better deal for you would be? Should you buy? Should you rent? Should you lease? And these are the issues that they are trying to get to in this general subject of estimating with focusing on equipment. You'll notice item number C, procedures. The exam is also interested that we recognize that forms are valuable in this process and gives us a number of exhibits along these lines. Item D in the outline, cost control, brings us back to the issue in accounting of how do we control our growth as a company. And now from the production point of view, that is to say you're in an office and you are now going to execute some work, now how do you control your office overhead, which would be a type of expense that would be called a fixed expense in the accounting subject? How do you best determine choices about purchases or rentals or leasing? All of this would be contained in that type of information. There's also section E, which deals with subs, and this information wants to point out that there is a distinction between your own internal processes and your negotiations with subcontractors. Topic number 5 is the topic of planning, and you'll notice that there are preliminary plans and then final plans. And the point here is that this dovetails back into the critical path method, because it's telling you that in this process of setting up your estimate, you initially set up a series of signposts for yourself, and then you begin to detail these signposts by indicating how long activities take. And the book will differentiate between such things as micro activities, and you want to be familiar with how this works. Item number 6 deals with the bid process. We've talked about this in the AIA documents, so this should just be a review. Item number C deals with general clauses and conditions. What are the legal requirements for operating a job? And again, you have the background based on your knowledge of the AIA documents to dovetail this information together. Topic number 7, project execution. Now, how do you operate this project? How do you deal with an intransigent or an uncooperative subcontractor? What is the correct response if you cannot get work done through a subcontractor? What is your personal liability or your company's liability if the sub does not follow certain rules, such as OSHA regulations? And those are the type of topics that are dealt with there. Continuing on, we now are going to take up the subject of plan reading, which will be basically the remainder of this videotape. Amongst your exhibits in Module 10, you have one that deals with the subject of reading plans. We'll be going over a plan set in a moment, but you want to spend some time looking through this, the idea being that if you're given a set of plans on the exam, you want to take a minute or two to look through them, get some idea of what it is you'll be answering questions about, and this little guide can help you. The next exhibit that you have deals with some of the symbols that you'll need to be able to interpret. This first symbol over here is a detail name. The top of it is going to tell you the name of the detail. The bottom of it is going to tell you the page number. In this case, we would be looking for detail A, page number 2. This line over here has a significance because it turns in a direction. And you need to recognize that this is there to illustrate that when you look at this detail, you'll be facing in the direction that this is pointing. This could be important because sometimes information that you need is not on the detail of the specific thing you're looking for. You may find the information that you need, however, because it's in the background of another detail. And the only way you would know that is by recognizing how the detail was oriented. A symbol like this indicates that there's a schedule. A symbol like this indicates that there's an angle that's being pointed out. It's very important when you look at plans to accurately get measurements. Many of the measurements are taken center to center, in which case this would be the symbol. Although the measurements will be given one way on the plans, the questions that you will ask may require a modification of the dimension that's given. For example, if I indicated that a measurement was taken from the center line, however, the center line was extending dead center through a shape, perhaps